and it says we are live. And matter of fact, we are that live that we are already in the middle of the screen. All right, so if you're ready, we can start.
All right then.
Yeah, so okay, well, 3 minutes earlier, but we had some issues with the software, but it looks like it's all working. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Bonsard of Radio Retrofuture with the first live stream of 2024, and I have to check real quick if the audio settings are still properly working. Let me see. It should work. Okay. So, and today we have our first guest of the year, Mage Leader. Good day, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Happy to be here.
Yes, and thank you for being here. So we'll be discussing your new book. It's already out, right?
Yes.
Yes. So we'll be discussing, and Hell will follow him, a Western, and yeah, we'll be discussing that. And for my end, some domestic announcement. I'll keep it short. Is that for the Kickstarter backers, the book should be with the distributor tomorrow. There was a day delay due to the snowfall, as I understood it, but that should be solved now. And yeah, so that should be done very soon. And then we'll be launching the new Kickstarter page, at least in the pre launch page, very quickly, which will be the Cosgood Girls. And depending if we get enough likes, I might reveal the new cover for the book as well. So we'll see how it goes. But now back to our guest. Could you explain a little bit to our audience who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Mage Leader. I run a YouTube channel right here on this site. Most of what I cover is fictional universes. The bulk of it is focused around the BattleTech universe. For those who are familiar with that is, if not, imagine if you had the political machinations of Game of Thrones, made it about twice as interesting, and added giant robots to it in space, and you've got BattleTech. That's primarily what I cover on my channel, though I do dabble in some other things as well. Recently, I've kind of been fulfilling a lifelong dream and getting into writing and publishing my own novels. So this one is actually my first novel that I've put out. I'm pretty happy with how it came out. It's been reviewing really well, so I'm happy to share it all with the rest of you guys.
All right, so we'll discuss it, and yeah, let's just get right into it. What is it, and what is it about?
So, and Hell Followed With Him is a Western. I wrote it in the spirit of the classic shows of the genre, classic books of the genre as well. Uh, the sort of the sort of more classic era of the Western. Before you get into your Clint Eastwood types, it's more in vein of something like The Rifleman or Have Gun Will Travel. Uh, the old fashioned kind of western that's all about the heroism, the romanticism of the era, all about trying to do the right thing and make a difference. The main character is Reverend Elijah Sheffield. He is a circuit riding preacher who moonlights as a bounty hunter. The story involves him riding into a troubled town on his route and looking to solve their problems with corruption and bandits who are besetting people on the roads outside of town. It is a very personal story, forces him to confront a bit of his past, as well as his own sort of limitations as a person. So it's a very personal and interesting story in that regard.
All right, and you said this was your first book. How did you start learning the craft? Did you start with short stories? How did that process go for you?
So it's a little confusing because I started out. I can't remember the first story I wrote. I've been doing it as long as I can remember. I've been a big reader for most, if not all, of my life. Pretty much ever since I could read, I wanted to write. So, I started out hearing about the great authors and the work that they did, and kind of kind of grew to idolize some of them. Wanted to be one. So I've been working at writing for a long time. In terms of more serious writing, as opposed to just jotting down stuff in notebooks, that probably started for me. I want to say right as I was getting out of college a few years ago. I started getting a bit more serious with my writing. I started tons and tons of different projects. This is the first one that I've ever managed to successfully bring to completion. Anyone who's written knows that you'll have 2 dozen story ideas, and maybe one or two of them will actually make it through all the
Hmm.
editing process to actually get to a finished state. So this is the first one out of many that I've actually managed to get all the way done.
All right. So I think you're already working on a new project. Could you also give a little bit of an idea of what that is going to be about?
Yeah, so I've got a few different projects in the works in terms of uh, which books come next. I've got a novel in the works. I've got a heist novel. It's another period piece. It's set in the 1930s. The idea is a sort of a gentleman thief type of character. If you're familiar with Father Brown, you may know about the character of Flambeau. Kind of based off of that guy. But it's set aboard the RMS Olympic in 1934. So right between the two world wars, kind of gearing up for some things to change in Europe. That's the backdrop that it's all taking place against. Uh, Kind of the end of one age and the transition into another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see why you also enjoy steampunk then, because you did mention that, but let's talk about it a little later. So when you were working on your actual first book, what would you say was like your biggest hurdle? What was like the biggest thing? How to say this? Um, what was one of the biggest misunderstandings about the writing craft when going into this?
So when you first start out writing, there's a lot of you can fall into a trap very easily of setting too high expectations for yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
want to go out there, you want to write the next big thing, you want to, you want to make a splash because we hear all these success stories about somebody who goes out, they write their first book, it's this massive smash hit, and everyone's buying it. What we kind of don't realize sometimes is that's like the 1% of writers, and so the
Less.
thing that I fell into was that I would get into the story, I'd be writing it, and then I'd come across something that wasn't perfect, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'd have a massive crisis upstairs, trying to figure out how I was going to fix it. Uh, in reality, most of it was stuff I really didn't need to worry about all that much. If you keep reading your work and constantly chipping away at it, trying to get it absolutely perfect in every respect, you're never going to finish it. And that's kind of the biggest hurdle that I ran into is dealing with dealing with the expectations that I set
Mm-hmm.
for myself.
Oh yeah, definitely knowing when something is good enough is definitely a very important aspect of the writing process. I think for many aspiring writers is the idea, you know, that like you said, the first book is gonna be like their biggest hit. It's gonna be their magnum opus. I forgot who said this, but you know, you always have to still have to write your magnum opus. I think that's a good lesson for any writers out there. Um, yeah, and now your book is out. What is the current challenge you have with it?
So I think part of it is marketing. Marketing is always a challenge. It's trying to get the word out there and get more people interested in it. I'm not the type of guy who likes to blow my own horn. I don't really like going around making a big deal out of myself. I don't like pestering other people with my stuff, but at the same time, that is how you get eyes onto your work. That is how you get people to actually give it a shot. So it's been a learning process trying to get my name out there a bit more, get people to give it a try, encouraging people to leave some reviews on it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of
Yeah.
people don't really understand just how important that is. And
Yep.
like it's not just we don't just want positive reviews. We want the negative ones too. It's about the number of reviews more so than the star rating at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day.
Yeah. Well, for some websites, if you want to advertise there, they demand you at least have like 20 ratings on that page before they will allow you to advertise on their website as well. So there's all these things. Well, one thing that I learned writing is when writers come together. When you start out, you think, oh, everyone is just talking about the writing process and how to create the best characters and all that stuff. But then actual experienced writers come together, and all they talk about is marketing. It's all they talk about. Uh,
Yep.
so that's something that I learned about it. When it comes to your writing career, what is the one thing you are looking forward to or hoping for?
So we live in an age where storytelling is kind of in a state of crisis, I think, where we've got all this big budget stuff coming out, all just so many resources being funneled into projects that they're just not all that great. People aren't really paying attention to them. People aren't watching them all that much. People are kind of thirsting and starving for decent quality entertainment. It doesn't have to be the next blockbuster, but people want a good story. We've gotten into a time where it's more about messaging people with your intended ideology than it is just telling something that's entertaining. Really, honestly, if I want to say what my number one goal is when I'm writing, is to have people look at what I've written and say, yeah, yeah, that guy was entertaining. I don't need to be the next big thing, but I definitely want people to have a generally positive impression. I want to know that I've helped people have a good time, in an age where it's getting harder and harder to find enjoyable entertainment.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely something. Same for gaming. I'm looking for an era where big companies invest more in mid-tier games. The $20 range rather than. Oh God, what was it they recently mentioned that they want to make $200 ones or $75 ones? A ridiculous price.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it recently went up from $60 to $70. That was already quite a bit of a stretch. Even Nintendo hopped on that bandwagon, and oh my word, they want to raise it again. It's absolutely outrageous, and it's like if you guys cut the budget down a little bit, you probably find you could still make some pretty good games, and you wouldn't have to charge as much for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you a gamer yourself? Apart from
Oh yeah,
BattleTech?
oh yeah, big time.
All right. What kind of games do you enjoy?
Oh, there's a few different genres that I play more so than others. I'm really big into first person shooters, tactical shooters in particular are some of my favorites. I like a good RPG. I've been playing through Baldur's Gate 3 again. I've been hopping into some old classics like Breath of Fire and Chrono Trigger.
Mm.
So I go back and forth between a few different types of games. I'm a big fan of flight simulators as well. I play a lot of DCS World. I absolutely love doing that.
Mhm. Were games an influence on your own writing?
I wouldn't say somewhat, I suppose. I think film and TV were a bit of a bigger influence as well, but the biggest influence has been other books because I grew up. My parents didn't really. They still don't. They still don't really like gaming as a hobby all that much. So I grew up reading books. That's where most of my inspiration comes from. But I'm sure that there's plenty of things from games that I played that have bled in even without me realizing it.
Hmm. And what books would you say were or writers were a big influence on you when you're writing your books?
I'd say the big three are going to be Tolkien. His way of describing natural scenes, I think, had a big impact on me. C.S. Lewis with the way that he brought likable characters to life, and Brian Jakes
Ah, yeah,
was the
Brian
one,
Jacks.
probably the author I read the most as a kid. I adored the Redwall series so
Mm-hmm.
much. I still do. I'll go back and reread those books. They still hold up amazingly. And just everything about how Jakes handles his characters, how he describes his scenes, how he moves the action along, it's all masterfully done. And it's just a great time to read. So that's probably
Mm-hmm.
my biggest influence right there.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm dyslexic. I don't enjoy reading, but Brian Jacks. I read the Dutch translations, but
Hmm.
those were one of the few books as a kid I could actually read and was actually looking forward to reading. That's a rarity for me. I'm still looking for books currently that like that. Until then, I really depend on audiobooks. Probably also the reason why I started making some audio dramas myself.
Audio is a great field. I grew up listening to tons of old radio shows. I love the Green Hornet with a
Oh yeah.
passion. I absolutely love the Green Hornet show. If you haven't listened to it, you really should. It's fantastic classic radio. But that's been another dream of mine, is to actually do like fully produced audio productions. Focus on the Family is a company here in the States that made uh, audio audio recordings that are both they read from the book itself, but they also do like a full audio drama around it. They did a great series for Chronicles of Narnia that is
Hmm.
absolutely worth listening to.
All right. Yeah, I made my own audio. Well, I make my own audio dramas for my YouTube channel, um, which I really need to get back into at some point. I did my own audiobook for the second book in our series. Don't ask me why I did only the second book and not the first book. But that's what I'm currently working on, which unfortunately got delayed due to my health issues at the moment. But that's something I will be continuing very soon as well. The fun thing, I got into the audio stuff for by making a radio station for a Fallout 4 mod.
Mm.
That's yeah, and it's also it's still available on Nexus Mods, and it's also on my YouTube channel for people who want. It's a steampunk radio station, but
That's
it's
really cool.
yeah, it's actually set in the world of Fallout 4. So I wrote a complete. It was also my first writing gig, so it has like an actual character with his companion, and then it has like because of my contacts in the steampunk community, I catered all these bands, asked their permission, like, hey, do you want your music to be included? Some people did covers as ghouls for it as well. We've got some commercials in there in the later episodes as well. So yeah, radio. Yeah, I think on YouTube it's called simply Steampunk Music for Fallout. If you're interested.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, and by the same token, I mean, I've done an audio production on my own channel as well. I've kind of gotten back in and restarted it. I did a reboot of it, but I've got a fan story for BattleTech. It's called A Twist of the Knife, and that's essentially an audiobook of my own creation that I'm doing. I also did an audiobook of one of the official BattleTech novels, Measure of a Hero, on my channel, which I think still stands as my most popular video that I ever uploaded.
mm-hmm. Right, right. Yeah. All right. So what other content do you have coming up on your YouTube channel at the moment?
Oh boy. So we got some interesting stuff going on. There's the usual stuff. I'm working on another chapter of Twist of the Knife. I'm working on the main thrust of my channel is I cover the different battle mechs that are in the BattleTech universe. So the different giant robots people use. I do lore breakdowns of what they are, how they function, the circumstances that brought them into development, all that type of stuff. And I've got another one that I'm working on now. The company that currently carries the BattleTech license, which has been given to them by the actual IP holders. They've been a bit sketchy with some of the handling of the IP, and so one of the big next videos that I've been working on is actually figuring out uh, a recent set of events that's gone down and kind of applying it to the broader picture of how they're handling the brand. So it's kind of a more comprehensive look into how that company is doing and what the future of the franchise is going to look
Mm-hmm.
like.
Yeah, I actually had because they also have a steampunk game called
Hmm.
Leviathans, Monsters in the Air. I actually had them on my show to talk about that. I haven't got the new edition. I had the original edition of that game, which also quite an interesting story into itself. So I should really look into that. But I just I've had very little opportunity to play board games overall in the last couple of years, unfortunately.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's interesting. But what is it? Because you usually make content about the BattleTech universe. What is the draw? What is your why are you that drawn to that particular setting?
The BattleTech universe is probably the best realized space opera setting I have ever encountered.
Mm-hmm.
There are incredibly well realized factions. There is a very well told story between them and how they interact with each other up to a certain point. Uh, the license changed hands and new people got hold of the lore and it got really messy. So up to a certain point, it's utterly fantastic. Uh, it has some of the most detailed world building you can find. If you go onto the wiki for BattleTech, you can just spend weeks and weeks going through it because every you go to a planet and you can find the entire history of that one planet. Keep in mind, there's literally like 1,000 or more of these charted planets, and you can see which battles were fought there in which years and which individual units were participating in those battles, which officers of note were present, who was having their careers defined in that moment, and then you can follow who that person is and get their entire history going all the way back to where they're from. There's thousands upon thousands of things like that. You can get lost in the details to your heart's content because the writers put that much work and effort into actually crafting this universe. It's a rabbit hole unlike any other. And plus, I mean, you look at just how amazing some of the battle mechs are. The way they handle the futuristic combat is very unique and interesting. The mechs themselves have a very grounded feel to them, despite being clearly science fiction tech. So the entire thing feels very personal. It feels very real, and at the same time, it can be as deep and complicated as you. If you think 40K can be dense and complicated, it has nothing on what BattleTech can be if you really want to go into it. So it's got something for everyone. It's a fantastic setting.
Mm-hmm. How old is BattleTech now?
Let's see. I think BattleTech. I really should know this off the top of my head. I want to say it started in 83, 84. So it's been around a long time.
Then
Very,
it's
very long
almost
time.
as old as I am. Damn.
Yeah, significantly older than I am. It's been around for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what is? You already mentioned a little bit about the story decisions the current IP holder is making. What is your big hope for BattleTech at the moment, considering what happened recently?
So my biggest hope for it would be, I mean, ideally, I would like for the current IP holders to kind of get a grip. I feel like they're waffling a bit. I feel like they don't really know how to handle what BattleTech is. They've been trying to progress the story. So the thing about BattleTech is that it was originally owned by a company called FASA. FASA went bankrupt, they went under, and the license was bought up by WizKids. WizKids took the brand and they ran it into the ground. They produced an era called Dark Age, which was supposed to be this reboot, relaunch of the brand. Uh, Completely different in tone and style. It was almost its own. It may as well have been its own thing, and it was just using stuff that they bought up from the FASA Fallout. But then they tried to canonize that and tie it into the old BattleTech stuff because Dark Age wasn't selling very well. So they tied it into the original stuff that people actually liked and said, no, it's actually canon. And they invented an age called the Jihad to explain how it even happened, which made no sense and was just horribly written trash. The problem that Catalyst is having at the moment is that they've gotten this, and keep in mind, a lot of the guys who worked on BattleTech in the FASA days work for Catalyst now, doing BattleTech. So they've got this mangled up corpse of BattleTech in front of them, and this is something that boggles my mind. Instead of just saying, okay, the WizKids stuff never happened, we're going back to when it was good, we're picking up there, and we're going on. What they did instead was they didn't want to retcon it, so they just kind of picked up all the pieces and kind of assembled this broken facsimile of BattleTech out of the scraps. And I mean, there are parts of it that are okay. A lot of people do like the new Ill Clan era that they put out, but I mean, it's clearly assembled from broken pieces. There's a lot of things that don't really work, and honestly, it's an inferior product to what came out before. The brand would be so much healthier if we just started over and said this isn't working. And it's a little harder to do now because we've invested time and effort
Yeah,
and money
exactly.
into
Yeah.
the new era, so it's even harder to get them to consider rebooting it. I'd love it if they did that. If not, I would love if they were able to find a way to make it work a little better. I think there's a lot of details in the lore and the world that you could theoretically work into a good story. But from what I've seen, they're going in the completely wrong direction and just making it worse at every turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was you who made a video on Comstar and what they did with that, if I'm not mistaken. Or am I now confusing?
So it could be. I haven't made a lot of videos on it. I think I may have touched on a stream at some point about what my idea for how the story should have gone would have worked if I was going to do a reboot of the story. So I mean the idea is that the mass communication in the BattleTech universe is made possible by a piece of technology called the Hyperpulse Generator, or the HPG. That's what allows you to communicate with someone on the other side of the galaxy almost instantaneously. That piece of technology, the entirety of BattleTech revolves around. Comstar is the company that controls those HPGs. They are a semi-religious order of tech wizards, essentially, kind of like the Mechanicus from 40K, but not as over the top. They run these generators. So the Jihad era, which led to the Dark Age reboot, uh, it starts with this radical faction of Comstar called Word of Blake rising up and essentially going on a tear across the entire inner sphere. Giant chunks of the factions are wiped out in like half a paragraph, and a lot of the famous mercenary units simply get written out of the lore. It's a big mess. And at the end of it all, they finally defeat Word of Blake. But as they're on their way out, they send self-destruct codes to all of the hyperpulse generators, so
Oh.
they all just shut down. And they're lost technology. Nobody knows how to actually repair those. So that's kind of what's caused the mess. Is now we're trying to have this setting where we have these huge galaxy-spanning armies, these massive troop movements. There's no way to coordinate troop movements that size without HPGs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible. So the writers have been kind of shrugging and hemming and hawing, and be like, yeah, well, there's one that still works over here, and they have a couple over here. These guys don't, though, because that would be inconvenient to the plot. So theirs just wasn't working that day, and it's all very messy and confusing. So my
Yeah.
idea was that like priority one is to get those fixed, get them back online. You have a big scramble of all the factions fighting each other over, because now that Comstar is gone, there's a chance to actually control the HPG network. Which means you could spy on everybody's communications constantly. Everyone's gonna want that. So a whole war of people fighting over control, trying to get somebody involved who knows what they're doing to fix them and then control them. I think that would be a great premise for a rebooted setting.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I just had a question, but now it eludes me. Um, God damn it. What was it again? I forgot. Darn. Um, well, maybe you have something you want to touch upon, something that I comes. Yeah, well, what would be a good way for people who are new to the setting, who want to learn more about it, or think about getting into the game? What would you recommend to them?
So there's a few different places to start. You can start by looking for some of the older content produced by FASA. They have a lot of great places to get introduced. I typically recommend Tex Talks BattleTech on YouTube. He has a great series on a two-part series on the Ameris Civil War, which is kind of like the big event that launches the proper setting. It's basically like, if you're familiar with 40K, it's kind of like their equivalent of the Horus Heresy. The big event, the place to start, I think, is with the Ameris Civil War, and he covers that very well. He has a number of different videos on the different battle mechs, the different factions that are at play, and so we've got, his content is what kind of inspired me to launch my own channel. So there's a lot of stuff there. He's where I started with the BattleTech setting. So there's a good way there. Another good way is just go on what's called Sarna.net. They have a fantastic wiki there, and just start browsing. Just take a look around, and anything that looks interesting to you, click on it, read about it, go down a few rabbit holes, and see what's up.
Hmm.
find some novel recommendations. There's a lot to take in, so
Yeah, yeah.
you're not going to get a full grasp on it on day one. But there's, you can kind of just pick an area of BattleTech that you like and just hyper focus on that and enjoy that. So a
Mhm.
lot of people ignore massive chunks of the game just because they like a certain area of it better, and so most of their knowledge will revolve around that. So there's nothing wrong with that approach either. If that's easier for you.
Yeah, yeah, man. I learned about BattleTech through a game on the Mega Drive. I'm not even sure what it was called, but I know it was like isometric, and you were controlling a Mad Cat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know. Maybe it
I
was
think
simply called.
I think that's the Super Nintendo version of MechWarrior 2.
Oh, really?
I believe so. That's what that sounds like to me. It could have been Mech Commander, but if it's isometric and you're directly controlling it, I believe that's the Super Nintendo version of MechWarrior 2.
Okay, okay. I have no. I had a
Or
Mega
maybe
Drive,
Sega
so
Genesis. I forget
or
exactly which version it
Genesis
was.
for you Yanks.
Yeah,
But that
it, it
was
it may have been on the Genesis. I don't remember exactly.
yeah, probably both. But yeah, that was probably and Mech Warrior 2. I played that one on PC. I think I got it with a
Hmm.
graphics card at the time.
Yeah,
Um,
they sold that. It was a big thing for oh, I can't remember which company it was. There was a big launch of graphics cards. There were so many versions of MechWarrior 2. It released on basically every platform, and back in those days, a different graphics card mean that you needed a different version of the game because they weren't always compatible with each other. So MechWarrior 2 was bundled in with a lot of different tech packages. I think it was bundled in with a few sound cards. Like it was everywhere.
oh
It was
yeah,
a
sound
huge
card that was also a big thing back then. Yeah.
yeah.
That's yeah, but people. It's probably hard to imagine for people, but yeah, sound cards were like
I think
they
it was
all
bundled in
sounded
with a
very
few
differently.
Thrustmaster flight sticks. I think it was bundled in with some Thrustmaster flight sticks too.
Oh god, yeah, I got one of those as well at some point. But yeah, yeah, every time you install the game, you had to select the right sound card.
Hmm.
Otherwise, the sound wouldn't work or sound really weird. Yeah, it's Sound Blaster was a big one at the
Yes.
time. Sound Blaster.
Yes.
Oh man, how things have changed since then.
See,
Uh,
I didn't live through that era. I'm a lot younger than that, but I learned a lot of it as I got older because we had a lot of old computers around. So I've delved into the classic PC building
oh
stuff, and
man,
what an experience that was.
yeah, man, I remember the floppy disks and
Hmm.
the diskettes. Like my first, yeah. Well, it wasn't my first gaming computer, but I also had an Amiga 500. Played a lot of stuff on that, like all these copied games. I had like these whole drawers filled with diskettes that had all these.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh man, and some of those games were feel like bigger than some of the massive games they have now. It was quite incredible what they were capable of making back then. Um,
Yeah, a lot of them still hold up really well. Are
yeah.
like some of them are still kind of impressive. Like if you go back and play the original Unreal, you imagine playing that when it came out. Even today, you go into that and you're like, "Wow, this level is huge. It's massive."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Also, for the people in chat, welcome, Lindsay. If people have questions for our guests, please let me know. I do check it out. Yes, and maybe if I feel like it, I'll reveal the cover of our next book. Yeah. Which also kind of like brings me to what I also wanted to talk to you about. Unless there's something, is there still something you want to discuss about your own work before we change topic?
No, I think we're all set to move over to what you got for us.
Okay, yeah. It's because you said you were also a fan of steampunk. What has been your exposure so far to that genre?
So steampunk isn't something I dive into super hard. I appreciate the aesthetic of it. I like when people kind of dress in that manner. There's been a few, I guess, anime here and there. I want to say Last Exile is one that I
Yeah,
watched
oh
that was
yeah.
pretty
I
good.
did a whole series, whole kind of like tech stocks, BattleTech-esque thing on that. If you're
Yeah,
interested.
yeah. Last Exile was a really enjoyable one that I liked. Uh, mostly when I get into steampunk, when I think steampunk, I think Jules Verne,
Hmm.
because that was an author I grew up reading. I've always loved
Yeah, me
Jules
too.
Verne's work. So your 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, to the Moon, stuff like that. And so uh, that's most of my exposure to it is from an aesthetic point of view. I think that it's a really cool concept to combine the Victorian era, which is also the Western era, funnily
Yeah.
enough, but kind of combine those aesthetics with a science fiction setting, so you get these really cool juxtapositions of this outdated culture with this futuristic type of setting. So it's a similar appeal to something like Fallout, where you've got that 1950s and 60s aesthetic, but you're using laser weapons and all kinds of advanced technology like that. That sort of retro future. So it's basically that taken to its extreme. My my bigger uh, my bigger exposure to is something that's similar to it. It's diesel punk.
Hmm.
That's the thing I really get into. But I also really enjoy steampunk.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you touched upon Western, and I have this hypothesis. I want to make a video on that later this year. I want to make it for quite a while now. Is the relevance of Western to steampunk? I don't think there would have been steampunk without Western, because it already
Yeah,
touched upon many of the themes that are central to the steampunk genre. But also, you've got the period where you get like the Weird West, where you've got like the melange of Western with fantasy and science fiction, which recently got really popular in gaming for some
yeah,
reason. A lot of mid-tier stuff, so that's an interesting development. Um,
yeah. Well, we got some really good stuff too. We got like Hunt Showdown
yep,
and
it's the only game
oh,
I play
what's
at the moment. Yeah.
yeah, what's the other Blood West? I think it was
Yeah,
called
Blood
that came
West. You've
out.
got Hard West, which is pretty good. Blood West 2, which is a great achieve, which is kind of, well, not an RPG. It's more kind of like a very story focused XCOM, I guess. It's probably the
Yeah,
best comparison. No, Blood West,
yeah.
Hard
There's
West,
been a lot
Weird
of
West. Yeah.
there's been a lot of Western influence on sort of the post-apocalypse genre as well. If you play
Mm,
the more recent Wasteland games, like Wasteland 2 and 3, the Western influence on those games is huge. Like
yeah.
they're basically they have that sort of Fallout retro future thing going, but they've got a much more Western vibe to them than you would find in Bethesda era Fallout game.
Yeah, yeah. Then I think that Bethesda made some real missteps with that. Um,
Yeah, a
it's,
few here and there. Yeah,
well, I mean, one of the things that bother me about the Fallout setting is like it's 200 years after the bombs fell, and still they live in hovels as if it all happened like a week prior. It's like
yeah,
it's,
yeah. Like no, I mean I understand that a lot of the technology is lost, but at the same time, like nobody's really attempted to build much of anything.
yeah,
And
that-
it's a little like 200 years is a long time. Like
yeah.
that's the entire history of the U.S. up until now, more or less. And look at what we achieved in that time. They're going to have some brilliant minds coming out with new ways of doing things. Society's going to build somewhat.
Hmm. Well, I mean, just how long did it take them to build up Deadwood? Cities like
Right?
that.
Yeah.
Just the classic frontier towns. You'd expect something like that at least to happen, which
Right.
would
They don't really do tumble down shacks in that area because you look like an old west town. All they have are the bare essentials, things that they can scrounge up for themselves a lot of the time in the area, and they still build pretty nice, comfortable houses to live in. Not these gross tumble down things that we're seeing in Fallout. It's kind of a missed opportunity. I mean, I
yeah,
get why it's like
or
that. That's kind of the vibe that they're going for, that
mhm.
post-apocalyptic feeling. It's just a little silly when you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. They could, well, they could have had like I mean, not really Mad Max, but at least like Wasteland Nomads, where they have like all these old caravans drawn by Brahmin or something, and use that to, I don't know, herd Brahmin as they do in Mongolia or something like that.
Yeah,
That would have been
yeah,
pretty
and
cool.
I think the Wasteland series handles it a bit better. I mean, like Fallout used to be the Wasteland series, but the people who I think it's the people who made the old Fallout games came back to make more Wasteland games. So it's basically the spiritual successor to Fallout,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
Fallout is the redheaded younger brother of Wasteland. But that series is still going strong. They're excellent
Mm-hmm.
games,
Yeah,
and they do kind of handle that post-apocalyptic setting a
mm-hmm.
little bit more elegantly, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I tried playing the first Wasteland, but that's a bit too old school for me. Like, that is
Yeah,
really like one of the first RPGs. Except I played more player friendly RPGs with as much depth on the Amiga 500. Um, so I don't know about that, but two was pretty okay. But the problem with I have a lot of the RPGs, they take too long for me.
yeah,
So
that is something. They are a big time commitment, the Wasteland games. So you can't just
hmm
casually hop in and play them for a little bit. You gotta really dive in.
hmm yeah, that's my same issue with well, why I don't touch Baldur's Gate 3. I don't
Yeah,
touch that
no,
for the same reason.
Baldur's Gate 3 is a game I've got a love-hate relationship with. I played through it. It feels very poorly balanced to me. It's hard, and I don't mind a hard game, but it feels unfair a lot of the time, just outright. It's like, how in the heck am I supposed to get through this? You're only letting me level up once in a blue moon, and but I finish up all the content in the area, you move me on to the next one. I can't physically level up any further, and I just feel like I'm totally under leveled for everything that I'm facing. I
hmm
can't hit anything. I can't. My spells never go off properly. I can't heal myself. I'm facing tons of enemies with more health than me. This doesn't feel very fair. So you just end up save scumming your way through the whole thing. Quick saving whenever you do something right, and then when it goes wrong, you load back to when things were going right and try again.
Yeah, that's
But
a problem I have with RPGs overall. Baldur's Gate had a similar problem. Oh god, and then there are like also RPGs where you are at a certain high level parts, and then you encounter like some random homeless person, and he kicks your entire party's ass. Uh,
yeah,
that's,
yeah, there's a lot of that. Well, like the thing that happened to me today while I was playing is like I walk into a room with some like magic cats in it. I'm like, okay, well we're decently leveled. We should be able to do this. And it's like, well, actually, you can't hit any of them, and if you do use any of your spells, they explode and kill your whole party. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's fun. That's fun. I enjoy that.
yeah, wonderful,
Ugh.
wonderful. Yeah, that's one of my big issues with RPGs overall. What else? Yeah, so we are actually working on our own tabletop RPG with a American company, a startup company. That's based on our own steampunk setting, and we want to actually try to let it be a steampunk game and not another fantasy RPG with a steampunk skin. Um, However, just like many of the people who are seeing the art of our upcoming book, The Casket Girls, the game developer also wants to include the mecha that we're working on. Um, so that's what our upcoming book is also about. The first one of its kind that I've written, military steampunk. And I guess my question would be, how would you go about steampunk mecha?
So one of the big things is going to be how is it powered? How does it sustain itself? And the tricky part is going to be logistics. Logistics is always a struggle when it comes to mecha. They're going to be big, bulky, expensive. Their targets, their weapons are going to chew through ammo like you wouldn't believe. How do you take a machine that big and keep it viable in that sort of time period? So that's going to be one of the primary challenges is making it believable in that setting. And one of the things that I think that has been done here that I appreciate is that they've been kept relatively small. That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to justify something that's about as tall as a guy on horseback than it is to justify something that's the size of a high-rise building, because the technology for building stuff up that high wasn't really there. The building techniques that is kind of endemic with steampunk isn't really going to support that, especially not in the heat of combat. So uh, I think the other thing is, what is it going to be going up against when you've deployed these sorts of weapons into the field? Obviously, the other guys aren't just going to sit back and let them come at them without trying to put them down. They're going to develop a counter to it, whether that's their own machines or maybe sort of like an anti-mech weapon. So there's a whole lot of things to take into consideration when bringing new technology into the front. So as long as you don't necessarily have to make everything perfect with that, but as long as you're showing that you've taken it into consideration and you're addressing it, it'll show the fans that you take it seriously, I think, and they'll respond well to that.
Hmm. Yeah, well, like you see, I just put the image in the back of the background of our live stream as well. Is that they use trains. Now, as for the enemies that they go against well, alien creatures. They go by various names because there is no set species. They're different every time. But where the technology comes from in this world is that in the Association of Ishtar setting, what happened is that there are all these rifts to other worlds are opening up. And people started like gathering and reverse engineering technology that they found on those worlds. And that's how one faction managed to create these robots. Now there's a whole political, diplomatic thingamajig surrounding it. Why not everyone is using it? Um, but yeah, this is what you're looking at is a train of the Penal Legion that is basically fitted with volunteers that are fighting these aliens, and that's why they are allowed to have these robots as a kind of like support machines. Um, while the penal troops actually have an image of that as well.
So
Yeah,
what are the mechs armed with? I see what look like
these
pepperbox guns on them.
Yeah, these are mitrailleuses, which was they're kind of like multi-barreled shotguns that shoot phosphorus rounds. So it's kind of like
Ooh,
yeah,
oh,
uh,
that's nasty.
yeah. But like I said, they're not used to fire at people. Well, preferably. But yeah, so this is he drives another machine, which I might reveal to the audience in a moment. Um, but yeah, that one is armed with machine guns and mitrailleuses both, um, and also is far
Okay.
more advanced than this one, than the so-called CB3s. But yeah, they're using as a power plant. They use a melange of diesel power and electric motors.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I keep the technology grounded intentionally also. So if they encounter like alien robots, those alien robots are actually alien and not just another variation of what they already got. Um,
So how would you describe like the style of warfare here? Is it highly mobile? Is it prepared positions like trench warfare? Is it sort of a combination of the two?
Well, the thing is, because they fight like alien monsters, the problems they face is completely different. Like in the first mission, it's a straight forward engagement where they move into a village and there they encounter kind of like hive mind controlled hounds that are well pretty straightforward. And in this case, the robots are kind of like their heavy weapon platforms. With flamers and the mitrailleuses to kind of like thin out the larger groups, while the penal troops, the penal infantry, as it were, deal with the rest. But in another operation, it's a kind of alien that transforms its entire environment into kind of like how do you say, like a toxic marsh. So they cannot move through, and it also has like tendrils that are moving through the now soft ground. So the infantry cannot enter the march without getting pulled in. So they kind of combine their only tracked vehicle, turn their tracked vehicle into kind of like carrier platform for the CBs, as these machines are called, and use it as a kind of like I don't know, tank gunship or something like that, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so it's more like a special forces kind of style of warfare.
Yeah, they're kind of they constantly have to adjust their tactics and how they use these machines. So they're rebuilding these machines like mechano things all the time. Like a bit of a spoiler, but in the last mission of the book, they transformed their tank into a jet tank. I don't know if you're familiar with the mine clearing vehicles that they created using jet engines.
Yes, I am. Those are Soviet, I believe.
Yeah, that's the Soviets tried it as a mine clearing vehicle, but there is actually another one that's in action, used to extinguish oil field fires. It's actually,
Yes.
and that one is still in use as far as I know. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I'm playing with. And the first book is really a kind of like, okay, how does this unit work? What are the characters like? And the second book, I want to go more into the direction that they become a regular part of the army instead of just a penal unit. But they're trying to professionalize because, professional pilots are hard to come by in their line of work. So, yeah, that's... and then maybe in the future, because the alien invasion things are becoming such a problem, they actually allow all these private contractors to use these things and take on these alien invasions. And well, one thing will lead to another, and probably they'll fight each other eventually, or regular armies start using them as well. But yeah, that's for the future. Well, and depending on how the audience likes it, I suppose. But I got plans for it.
Okay. Well, I like the decision to put sexy ladies in the robots. That's always a plus.
Actually,
I'm always on board.
I have an actual historical explanation for that. So the book, the series is called The Casket Girls, and that's what the pilots are called. However, that's an historical reference. There actually were women called Casket Girls. They were usually prostitutes sent to the prison colonies, and they had like these well, not casket, but these boxes called cassettes or casquettes. Hence, that was bastardized to English as casket or coffin, casket of coffin girl. However, the female prisoners that were sent to those prison colonies were also separated from the male population for, well, obvious reasons. And they were like inside this convent that was nearby. So that kind of like gave rise to the idea that these women are trained separately from the men inside these machines, rather than being used as line infantry, as the expendable male, so to speak. And hence, yeah, female pilots. So that's the story.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's the story.
That's one of the more interesting explanations for it that I've seen. That, whatever the explanation, the end result is great, because two of my favorite things are attractive women and giant robots. So you've got me sold.
Yeah. Well, the this one in the that I now have in the corner is probably more attractive than most of them are. The one that's on the cover image, which I guess I'll have to show now, is well, lore-wise not as attractive as he might appear here. Actually, he's fairly unlikable, especially at the beginning of the book. but yeah, she gets to drive this really specific machine called Gévaudan. Are you familiar with the beast of Gévaudan?
I am not.
So the beast of Gévaudan is well, it's one of those. I guess you would call it a cryptid story now.
Hmm.
Which the French countryside was being terrorized by a kind of like weird wolf-like beast. It's a kind of a mystery of what it was, and it reportedly has been killed. And you know, according to the stories, it attacked over dozens of people, some of whom survived the attacks, and yeah, and hence the machine is called Gévaudan as a reference to that creature. The trains that the various penal battalions use are also called after the hunters from those events. But yeah, it's kind of like a big mystery whether these stories were actually true or not. So yeah, I put a lot of references to French history there. Um, and yeah, one of the characters is also gonna be a reference to a famous scandal related to the story surrounding Devil's Isle, as the prison colony, one of the prison colonies was called. So, yeah, for despite all the steampunk, most of my stories are all inspired by history, and that's
Yeah, I mean, well, they're still technically period pieces. I think the best thing to do with that is take a lot of inspiration from real history. I mean, history plays a big part in the writing that I do as well. You know, I said something in the Old West. It's got constant references to the Civil War throughout, which was a big deal in the American West. Lots of people remembered the Civil War, were there for it. So, yeah, it's a big part of my writing as well. So, it's always good to incorporate some of that, even if it's not set directly in a time period. You can find so much to work with in historical accounts that's makes for better stories than even you could ever think up.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one of the things that bother me with well, writing in general, and but particular in steampunk, my next video on the alternate history, I actually make history videos now, alternate history videos that take place in my world and how historical events led to the science fiction aspects of this timeline. The first two are about how they created the space program, and the next one is going to be about, well, one of the, I guess you can call them secret organizations, got formed starting with the Convention of Vienna. And yeah, so I do a lot of that stuff. I really love starting in a historical time period and then lift it off in science fiction direction. Um, So yeah, and I was going somewhere with that, but I forgot what it was. All right. So yeah, unless you've got some things you want to say or ask, I think we can call it here for tonight. Um, so yeah, where can people find your stuff?
So there's obviously my YouTube channel. You can look for my name on YouTube. As for my book, you can look for it on Amazon. I will say if you search for it on Amazon, you'll have to actually go to the books department. For some reason, it doesn't show up in regular search results. But search for it on Amazon and go directly to the book department, and you will find it there right at the top. That's the best way. There's a link in the chat here. So yeah, if you've been missing out on good quality old school entertainment, you are a fan of the Western genre at all, it's a great thing to go there. It's been reviewed by a few different people. Blaine Pardo did a review on it. He really liked it, so there's a pretty good chance that you will too.
All right. I also included the link in the video description for the people who are interested. As for my own stuff, yeah, I'm currently working on a new alt history video. Johan is gonna make new illustrations for that. We've been talking about that today, so I hope he does that very quickly. The Kickstarter is nearly at an end now. I expect that stuff to arrive all tomorrow with the distributor, and then you should all have it in your houses by the next few weeks. So yeah, those are the most important things. And of course, I've got a lot more writing in the pipeline. If you want to support the show and read our short stories, you can support us on Ream Stories, and that will also give you access to all our all our ebooks. Audiobooks is coming too. They're working on that platform, and you'll also get previews of books like The Casket Girls, which I need nearly done with revising that, so that should be done the next few weeks. And I expect the Kickstarter to be launched somewhere in March, April. That's kind of my timeline for this year. And with that, usually I ask my guests if they have some final words of wisdom to close out the episode.
Yeah. So one of the big things that I always try to encourage people to do is do not sell yourself short on your storytelling ability. People have been telling stories for hundreds and thousands of years. So, you may be better at it than you think. A lot of people take a look into this and they're like, I don't know if I could. It's worth giving it a try, but more than anything else, if you find that you can't do that, there's something that is currently lacking in the independent sphere, and that's people who go around and just do reviews, people who actively seek out independent work and telling us what their opinion is on it, whether it's positive or negative. And I think that that's another wonderful way that people can contribute to this growing Iron Age movement of independent media. So I'd encourage you to either give storytelling a try for yourself, even if you don't think you'll be good at it. And if you're really convinced you won't be good, help get the word out for other people. Review stuff. Let people know what's good, what's not, so that they can make informed purchases for themselves. I guess that's as close to wisdom as I get.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, regardless. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, maybe a bit late, but I hope you'll have a healthy and productive 2024. And with that, as always, make things your way. Good night.